Aloha, and welcome to the monthly public presentation of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Since 1990, the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii has been following our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education as we've grown to become one of the largest all-volunteer, nonprofit vegetarian societies in the nation. It's now time to introduce our special guest. We're happy to have with us tonight our own Dr. Grace Chen O'Neill. Grace Chen O'Neill, MD, is a board-certified emergency physician who practices right here on Oahu. She graduated from New Jersey Medical School and completed her training in New York. She has always loved Hawaii and decided to make Hawaii her home in 2013. Dr. O'Neill has been a vegetarian for more than 25 years and a vegan for the last 8 years. She advocates plant-based diet for her patients to improve their health. In her free time, she blogs and creates videos about healthy living for her website, 365 Days of Graceful Living. And it's called graceinhawaii.com if you'd like to see it. Dr. O'Neill also loves practicing yoga and preparing vegan treats in the kitchen with her husband, Tom. Her presentation tonight is entitled, Happy Gut, Happy Life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Grace Chen O'Neill.
So the gut microbiota are significantly more diverse than the other sites on the body, and the gut microbiome is really dynamic. So if you change your diet, if you get medications, it can greatly change the gut microbiome. This is a schematic of the gut going from stomach, your small intestine, and then your large intestine or colon. And as we go down through the digestive system, the amount of bacteria that inhabit like your stomach is a lot less than inhabit your small intestine, is a lot less than inhabit your colon. So the stomach kind of takes care of dissolving food. Then you have a lot of absorption happening in the small intestine. And the colon takes care of fermentation, which I'm going to talk about a lot in later slides. So this is a schematic I was talking about with good bacteria and bad bacteria. And you don't have to remember these bacteria. I'm going to be repeating them quite a few times, so you might end up remembering them, but you don't have to remember them. On the top, we have the good or beneficial bacteria for your gut. The ones that I will be talking about a lot are Lactobacilli and Bifidobacteria. E. coli, there are some good E. coli, obviously, and then there are some ones that can be pathogenic or they can cause disease, so I'm not going to really be focusing on that. And then we have bad bacteria. Has anyone ever heard of Campylobacter? So a lot of people come in the emergency room and they have diarrhea, and we'll send cultures, and a lot of people end up having Campylobacter. So it's usually a bacteria that causes disease. And then we have Enterococcus, another bacteria that causes disease. So this is considered like a non-beneficial bacteria. And then I think a lot of you might have heard of Clostridium difficile. What can happen is there's always bacteria in your gut, and when you're given an antibiotic, what can happen is that this bacteria, there is some of this in your gut, but usually it's not the predominant bacteria. But when you're given the antibiotic and it kills a lot of your good bacteria, then this bacteria, C. diff, or Clostridium difficile, is able to take over, and then it can cause havoc, causing very profuse diarrhea. And usually it doesn't cause people to die, but sometimes it can cause, people can die from C. diff. So here's a little schematic of how your gut microbiome is developed. And when you're a baby and you're born from your mother, you are either usually delivered vaginally, or lots of times people have to have a C-section. So if you're delivered vaginally, fortunately, you are able to get lots of the good microbiome from the vaginal area of your mother. However, if you're delivered by C-section, what may happen is that you might have the microbiome, unfortunately, of the operating room and some non-beneficial bacteria like staph, and you might be more susceptible to disease. So if you are having a C-section and you know it, what you can have the operating room staff do is try to get a swab of the vaginal area, and then you can put it on your child when the child is born to sort of colonize your child with good bacteria. As you become, as you're introduced to foods, when you're an infant, new foods, and your diet changes, your microbiome is changing a lot. When you're about 2 to 3 years old, it becomes more stable. And then when you're an adult, it becomes even more stable because your diet changes less. When you're elderly, unfortunately, lots of times what may happen is you might have less diversity in your microbiome. I'm speculating this could be for several reasons. I think that a lot of people who are elderly might be losing some of their teeth, so they might not be able to eat as diverse of a diet. Also, people may have limited mobility, which may limit their access to food. And if you're in a nursing home, you might be dependent on other people to give you food, and then it would be hard to eat a diverse diet, unfortunately. So everything is very dynamic in the gut. So our gut microbiome has a lot of function in digestion and nutrition. It performs a lot of the things that our body without it would not be able to perform. It digests compounds, increasing our ability to extract energy from our diet. It's able to synthesize, the microbiome is able to synthesize vitamins for us, also help us absorb iron and produce antioxidants, and also can help us with fighting pathogens, which I'm not really going to go into, but it helps a lot with immune system development. I just want to do more with my life than consume, metabolize, excrete waste, and reproduce. You know what I mean? And then this other little bacteria is saying, what is she talking about? Dysbiosis is associated with disease, so that's why the root is the same. Can anyone give an example of a dysbiosis or a disease that might be associated with a microbiome that's not healthy? Crohn's, yes, very good. Inflammatory bowel disease, yeah? IBS, yes. Irritable bowel syndrome, very good. Anybody else? Candida, sure, yeah. Sure, yeah, I guess traveler's diarrhea, yeah. How about diabetes maybe, or obesity? There's actually quite a lot of things, but I didn't list all of them. I just wanted to, concentrate on a few. Yeah? Arthritis, yeah, rheumatoid arthritis. Some of the autoimmune arthritis is definitely, like I was saying before, immune system differentiation is done a lot by the gut microbiome, so definitely. All right, so the next video I have someone you all may know, and he's gonna talk about a little bit about some of the gut problems he had when he was eating a little bit differently than he's eating now. So, have you guys been to KCC Farmers Market? This is my vegan chef.
My stomach was feeling particularly bad, and it was a night like any other. I had 2 or 3 Coors Light, and I went out to Wendy's for a double Baconator and chili with extra cheese. And I got home and I started vomiting, and I didn't stop for 3 days. Anything I put down would come back up, and it was really, it actually was very scary. I didn't go to a hospital right away because, I figured I'm just throwing up from the night before and I'm really hungover, and my stomach really feels crappy because I drank, this, that, and the other, and I was used to it feeling crappy. But finally I did wind up going to the hospital when I couldn't hold down water or crackers or anything. And they gave me an IV, which helped rehydrate me, and told me that, I had a really bad acid reflux. They said that I had gastritis. It wasn't until I got back here and went to the hospital that they said that I had duodenal ulcers. And I got an endoscopy, and they told me things were messed up, but they really didn't know what it was, and that, maybe it was Crohn's disease and they'll have to do more tests and everything like that. And they put me on omeprazole, Prilosec and omeprazole. I can't remember the name of the other brand at the moment. Zantac 75 or something like that. And they, with the help of those, I was able to eat again. My stomach kind of just felt like a lump it just felt dead instead of alive. And that felt better than it being alive and angry. In the meantime, I started eating again with juices and soups and rice, really helping my stomach kind of cope. And I never made it back to meat or cheese.
So that's the story of why he became vegan. So he talked about his stomach and how he had a lot of problems with his stomach. So your stomach microbiome can be affected by your dietary habits, which was, as you can see in Nick's case, some of the things he ate might have not been that good for his gut. Also, medication use and Helicobacter pylori. Does anyone know what Helicobacter pylori is or have had it before? Yeah? Yeah, someone said it out there. It can cause ulcers. So obviously, if you've been colonized with this bacteria, you can get an ulcer from that. Also, Nick mentioned that they had put him on proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers. And these can help your symptoms, but unfortunately, this has a lot of effect on your microbiome because different bacteria that's not supposed to be in your stomach can colonize your stomach if you have a higher stomach pH. And that can happen when you're having medication that is blocking acid production. So studies have found that treatment with proton pump inhibitors, just 2 weeks, reduces your acid secretion by 75% and permits bacterial and healthy bacterial colonization. And as I was saying, antibiotics can affect the stomach microbiome. A study was done finding that penicillin reduces lactobacillus, which is a very beneficial kind of bacteria I talked about in that slide, and also promotes yeast colonization of the stomach, which someone else mentioned, candida as a dysbiosis. So. And then Nick mentioned that they didn't really know what he had, but they thought he might have had inflammatory bowel disease. And someone mentioned that as being a dysbiosis. Crohn's disease is an inflammatory bowel disease, and so is ulcerative colitis. And these diseases cause chronic inflammation in the digestive tract. And when you have ulcerative colitis, you also have an increased risk of cancer. Patients with inflammatory bowel disease have a less diverse microbiome than other healthy subjects, and they have reduced good bacteria. I put the name of the bacterium here, Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. I'm going to talk about it later, but it's a very beneficial bacteria, and they have increased pathogenic bacteria. And they found that just giving people the good bacteria reduced the severity of their inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease sufferers have 10 times less short-chain fatty acid-producing bacteria than healthy subjects. So I'm going to talk about short-chain fatty acids, in case people don't know what that is. So they are an important energy source, and they are produced when dietary fiber is fermented in the colon. Butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid, is a primary energy source for colon cells, and it's anti-carcinogenic, means anti-cancer, and anti-inflammatory. Butyrate has been found to inhibit colon cancer cells in test tubes. So unfortunately, people on a high-protein, low-carb diet, like we would say like Atkins or something like that, have less short-chain fatty acids in their feces, which means they are making less of it. So they're not getting this important energy source. Just wanted to touch on colon cancer a little bit. We have 147,000 new cases of colon cancer yearly in the United States. Gut microbiota has also been found altered in colon cancer patients. And certain types of microbiome, which I sort of mentioned before, the Clostridium, but also Bacteroides is a pathogenic bacteria generally, and they are associated with increased risk of colon cancer. But if you have a Lactobacillus, which is the bacteria in the first slide with the pictures, this decreases your risk of colon cancer. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about irritable bowel syndrome. Usually the symptoms are alternating constipation and diarrhea, or you can have constipation primarily or diarrhea primarily, bloating, just abdominal pain. I have a video of Jade, and she has had irritable bowel syndrome, and she's going to tell us about some of her symptoms and what she was dealing with.
I grew up in a very heavily influenced Latin household, and of course, growing up Mexican, meat is a huge part of our culture and our day-to-day life, our family gatherings, our meals are based around meat. So I feel like I grew up conditioned almost to eat meat. Like in the morning, I would have sausage or ham or something. Lunch, I would have some sort of meat-based sandwich or tuna, and then dinner, I would have meat when it was. I've tried everything from a paleo diet, a FODMAP diet, gluten-free diet, pretty much cutting out all alcohol, cutting out all processed foods, just everything that I could try. I did try going vegetarian once about 10 years ago.
Did
now
that
that I
help?
think about it. No, it did not, because I was eating, I was still eating a lot of cheese, a lot of
So the dairy.
starches, carbs,
Yeah.
just, I wasn't doing it right, per se. I did grow up an athlete as well. So
What kind of sports did you play?
I wrestled
Oh, cool.
my entire life, yes. And so that's such high intensity and high energy sport and cardio. So I would be so hungry, but I was just meat, carbs, just anything to like ease my hunger. And I think that's what eventually led to my severe IBS because of my long history of just eating poorly. I finally decided to go to the doctor because my symptoms were getting so bad. I wasn't even able to sleep at night because my stomach would just hurt so bad. And I had a colonoscopy done. I had an endoscopy done. They ran all these other blood tests, and it came back just with irritable bowel syndrome. And then,
doctor have any advice for you about that? Like, did they suggest the FODMAP diet, or?
yes, the doctor was the one who suggested the FODMAP diet, and I tried that and still had zero luck alleviating all of my irritable bowel syndrome symptoms. And it wasn't until I came across one of my friends who was vegan, and I decided to try a vegan diet. I was very skeptical at first because there is a lot of stigmatism that comes with being vegan, like it's too hard, you don't get enough nutrients, and I was scared at first. It didn't even cross my mind until about 6 months ago to even try it. But as soon as I became consistent and started eating the right things and making sure all of my meals were plant-based, immediately all my symptoms were gone.
All right, so Jade's symptoms improved after she was able to change her diet, which changed her microbiome. The manipulation of the microbiome can control key symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, research has found, and patients with irritable bowel syndrome actually have been found to have a less diverse and less stable microbiome. So she did it without taking any medications. I know there's some commercials on TV, I don't know if you've seen them, where people can take some medications to make it better. All right, so some of you are probably wondering what this bacteria is, and you're probably wondering, since this is a vegetarian society, how does being vegetarian or vegan benefit my gut microbiome? So I'm going to talk about Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. This is an anti-inflammatory bacteria, and this produces a lot of butyrate, which I spoke about before. It's a short-chain fatty acid, and that plays a big protective role in the colon. Faecalibacterium has been associated with the highest fiber intake, and I think this is why vegans had a higher ratio of Faecalibacterium compared to controls. Also, it's most abundant in people who are lean, and it plays a protective role in metabolic disease, reducing the risk of metabolic syndrome, so heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and also colon cancer. Jackie was on a standard American diet before. She changed her diet, not for losing weight or anything, but she had a very nice side effect.
Prior to being vegan, I had lived a standard American kind of lifestyle, and it's not the most healthiest way to be. I really wanted to make a change in my life, and that led me into more films involving awareness, and the final nail in the coffin was Gary Yourofsky's film. It's called Why Vegan? Yeah, and it's such a great film. It's an hour of your time. I knew about the immunizations, the hormones, all that stuff, but I had no idea that the emotions and the stress affected what we ingested, and that we took that on for ourselves. So when he helped me connect those dots, there wasn't any looking back then. I chose to do a 30-day run. And after, the 21 days it makes to break a habit, I felt the shift in me. I felt so much more lighter, freer, liberated.
So you lost 50 pounds.
It started to just melt off. I mean, I was really overweight. I was really chubby.
I talked about it before, how the gut microbiota actually has a very big role in obesity. Researchers have found that germ-free mice, which are mice that are taken out of their mother by C-section, kind of living in a bubble, so they don't have any gut microbiome themselves, but when they receive a transplant from conventional mice, they can increase their fat tissue without changing any of the kind of food they eat, just because there's increased energy harvest from the gut microbiome. And also they have found that obese mice have different kinds of bacteria inhabiting them than skinnier, lean mice. So obese mice tend to have more Firmicutes, and lean mice have more Bacteroidetes. And then I just wanted to touch on this just because it's a big subject right now. Dietary phosphatidylcholine and carnitine is metabolized into trimethylamine, and then it goes to the liver and it becomes trimethylamine and oxide. And unfortunately, this trimethylamine oxide, I'll just call it TMAO because it's easier, is associated with an increased risk of heart disease. But fortunately, if you're vegan, you don't have the intestinal bacteria necessary to produce it from carnitine or phosphatidylcholine. Researchers have found that healthy human volunteers on a vegan diet did not have increased TMAO levels after they were given phosphatidylcholine. So it's a fortunate thing that we don't have the gut bacteria. I mean, we used to think that people had more heart disease who are on a carnivorous or omnivorous diet because, it was more saturated fat, more cholesterol, but actually the gut microbiota also plays a role. So that's kind of cool. Anybody know where you get carnitine mostly from? Yeah, that's right. Animal products only. We do need a certain amount of choline, but you don't need a lot of it, so you don't really need to eat eggs. You can get your choline from asparagus or broccoli, and it's enough. So, but most of it, if you have a high intake of it, that makes you more susceptible to heart disease, if you're eating the egg yolk. So now I'm going to go into how you can improve your microbiome, which is probably all what you guys came from, yeah. So anyone ever go to the doctor and want some antibiotics for, to get better? Yeah. I know there's people who want to do that, come on. So in the emergency room, I see lots of patients that come and they want to get an antibiotic because they have an important event coming up and they want to get better before the event. Unfortunately, if you have a virus, it's not going to help a virus, So, and it actually harms your microbiota a lot, like we were talking about. Just 3 to 4 days of a common antibiotic, ciprofloxacin, your microbiome will decrease in diversity. And only after a week will some bacteria start to come back, but some bacteria never come back. And you can be affected for up to 4 years. So the next time your doctor says you need an antibiotic, you can just ask, is it really necessary, right? And now I'm going to go into feeding your gut. All right, so I think the Western diet, unfortunately, I'm talking about the standard American diet, like Jackie talked about, doesn't feed the colon very well. One of the keys to health is fermentation in your large intestine, because most of your microbiome is actually residing in your large intestine or colon. So you have to encourage the fermentation in your intestine by giving yourself lots of plants, beans, nuts, seeds, fruits, a lot of fiber, basically. And some people, they try to get fiber by eating, those Fiber One bars, or, they have, it's not really good. And it's not good because It's not, I mean, it's good to get some fiber, but it's not optimum. You really want to get a diverse amount of different kinds of fiber from your diet, because that way you can have a diverse microbiome. So there's other benefits to fiber as well. People who eat lots of fiber, they actually are able to excrete more calories that they consume, so you can lose weight by just increasing your fiber. So for every gram of fiber you eat, you eliminate between 8 to 12 calories, which I think is pretty cool. If you told them, I'm sure a lot of people don't know that. If they knew that, they'd be eating more fiber. So now I'm going to talk about poop, because you need to know if your poop is good, because then you will know if your poop is good, then you're getting enough fiber, right? So your poop is composed of these different things like dead bacteria, a lot of water, fiber, and what should your bowel movement look like? So a well-formed bowel movement is about 1.5 feet long. And a lot of people, they think that, I see a lot of people in the emergency room and they have, diverticulitis or diseases that you get mainly from having a very low fiber diet. And they say, but I have enough fiber, I have a bowel movement every day. But actually, that might not be enough if your bowel movement is hard and you're sitting on the toilet for 30 minutes with a magazine. It's probably not a sufficient amount of fiber. So unfortunately, when you're constipated, the food in your gut becomes more attractive to pathogenic or harmful bacteria while it stays there longer, which kind of makes a less good environment for good bacteria. So has anyone seen the Bristol stool chart? Yeah? Okay. So I know someone who's type 1 probably isn't going to want to admit it, or if you're type 7, you might not want to raise your hand, but you can think to yourself what kind of stool you have, but you want to be somewhere like a 3 or a 4. So you can just stare at it a little bit longer and see. Yeah, so too hard if it's is not good, and too soft is pathogenic diarrhea kind bacteria. So there's 2 kinds of fiber, soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber, to make a summary of it, makes your stool kind of pass a little bit slower, whereas insoluble fiber adds bulk to your stool and makes it pass quicker, so it helps you with constipation. Now, we used to think that soluble fiber doesn't really have a lot of benefit, but actually now we know differently, because soluble fiber are prebiotics. These are non-digestible dietary components that benefit your health by providing food for your beneficial gut bacteria. They travel to the large intestine where they undergo fermentation. So they support the growth of beneficial bacteria that we talked about, Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus. And they reduce pathogenic bacteria. So benefits, there are many. Reduce inflammation, reduce your body weight like any kind of fiber, increase production of the short-chain fatty acids that we talked about, and they also help regulate your sugar and your cholesterol by binding to them and slowing their absorption in blood. And so some of you, maybe none of the raw vegetables really appeal to you, so I made a little video about how you can get your prebiotics.
This is Grace with Graceful Living. One episode I talked about probiotics. Now I'm going to talk about prebiotics. Prebiotics are indigestible plant fibers that are food for your probiotics, or your healthy gut bacteria. One way to incorporate prebiotics into your daily diet is to eat them every morning for breakfast. Quick oats are really easy to make. All you would do is add some oats to a mason jar. I fill it almost all the way to the top, but leave room for some extra goodies. I added blueberries and bananas. You could also add other things like nuts and seeds and cacao. Here I'm adding some nut milk. And then give it a little bit of mix. I like adding bananas because it changes its consistency a little bit. Gives a nice consistency to the whole thing. And then finally, when I'm done mixing, I'll just put the jar on it and leave it in the fridge overnight. Next morning I wake up. This is what it looks like now. I'm gonna have a bite. It's easy and delicious.
For those of you who are concerned about getting your prebiotics, there's actually plenty of soluble and insoluble fiber in all fruits and vegetables, so you really don't have to worry if you're getting a good, varied vegetarian, vegan diet. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to probiotics. What are probiotics? So they're fermented foods containing lactic acid bacteria, beneficial bacteria like Bifidobacteria lactobacillus. They accelerate your intestinal transit time like all things do, and then beneficially regulate your intestinal health like we talked about in the previous slides. They inhibit pathogenic adherence or bad bacteria adhering to your colon. And also they have been used successfully to prevent traveler's diarrhea. And they also decrease cholesterol and increase insulin sensitivity. And probiotics have also been used to treat inflammatory bowel disease. So Lactobacilli is the primary thing you'll find on the back of those probiotics that you see in the store. And you can get it from fermented vegetables. And does anyone know what kefir is? It's kind of like the new thing. What is kefir? Yeah, well, it's like a raw fermented milk, and you can use coconut milk, kefir. There's actually I think a new brand that's making coconut milk kefir, and you can buy it in the stores. And then you can just buy the probiotic pills, and there are some yogurts you can get it from, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So this is a picture of a probiotic, and I guess the writing might be a little bit small for you to see, but as you, it shows mostly lactobacilli, different kinds, different strains, and then you'll see bifidobacteria, which is mostly what we talked about in the earlier slides. And here this is another probiotic, and you'll see again lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. And it's important that you ask when you buy them that they're, refrigerated, they're stored, because as time goes on, if they're, sitting at room temperature, especially in Hawaii where it's very hot, then they might lose their effectiveness. All right, so yogurt. Unfortunately, not all yogurts contain live probiotic bacteria, and that's because yogurt in the United States is pasteurized to kill off bad bacteria, but it kills off the good bacteria too. So the live cultures have to be added after pasteurization. But of course, owing to the perishable nature of yogurt, some of the bacteria might not even, be effective by the time you're eating it if it's around sitting on the shelf a long time. And unfortunately for yogurt they add a lot of sugar to make it more appetizing for people. So I don't really recommend people use this necessarily, because there's so many other ways to get it that are more delicious. And I have one more video to end the talk with about probiotics.
This is Grace with Graceful Living. Today I'm going to talk about probiotics. Probiotics are live bacteria and yeast that are good for your gut. Fermented foods are foods that have been through a process of lactofermentation in which bacteria feed on the sugar and starch in the food, creating lactic acid. This preserves the food and creates good enzymes, vitamins, omega-3 fatty acids, and strains of probiotics. I recently made a trip to Taiwan where stinky tofu is a delicacy. It is a tofu that is fermented and has a very stinky smell. Here we're going to try the stinky tofu out. It's very stinky. He's going to take a bite. Let's ask him how it goes.
How is it?
Wonderful. Wonderfully stinky.
Is it stinky too?
It is.
You like it?
Stinky and delicious.
Oh, wonderful.
If you do happen to try stinky tofu, please make sure to ask that the stinky tofu was not fermenting in any meat brine or broth.
So that's the end, but Yeah, just another way to get your probiotics. It's really not hard if you eat the right foods. So
Thank you all for coming. Have a safe return home. Mahalo.